Many have considered Led Zeppelin to be one of the most successful, innovative, and influential bands in the history of rock music. The group comprised vocalist Robert Plant, guitarist Jimmy Page, bassist/keyboardist John Paul Jones, and drummer John Bonham. Led Zeppelin have influenced hard rock and heavy metal bands such as Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Rush, Queen, Scorpions, Aerosmith, the Black Crowes, and Megadeth. Led Zeppelin are the third highest selling band and the fifth highest selling music act in the United States, and one of only 4 acts to earn 5 or more diamond albums. They achieved 8 consecutive number ones on the UK albums chart, a record for most consecutive number 1 albums in the UK shared with ABBA, and this is the story of Led Zeppelin. In 1966, London guitarist Jimmy Page joined the blues-influenced rock band the Yardbirds to replace bassist Paul Samwell Smith. Paul soon switched from bass to lead guitar, creating a dual lead guitar lineup with Jeff Beck, R.I.P. Jeff Beck by the way. After Beck left in October of 1966, the Yardbirds, tired from constant touring and recording, began to wind down. Page wanted to form a supergroup with Beck and himself on guitars, and The Who's Keith Moon on drums, and John Entwistle on bass. Vocalist Steve Winwood and Steve Marriott were also considered for the project. The group never formed, although Page, Beck, and Moon did record a song together in 1966, Beck's Bolero, in a session that also included John Paul Jones. The Yardbirds played their final gig in July 1968 at the Luton College of Technology in Bedfordshire. They were still committed to several concerts in Scandinavia, so drummer Jim McCarty and vocalist Keith Reef authorized Page and bassist Chris Draja to use the Yardbirds' name to fulfill the band's obligation. Page and Draja began putting a new lineup together. Page's first choice for the lead singer was Terry Reid, but Reid declined the offer and suggested Robert Plant, a singer for the band of Joy and Hobbs-Tweeter. Plant eventually accepted the position, recommending former Band of Joy drummer John Bonham. John Paul Jones inquired about the vacant position of bass guitarist at the suggestion of his wife after Draja dropped out of the project to become a photographer. Page had known Jones since they were both session musicians and agreed to let him join as the final member. In August 1968, the four played together for the first time in a room below a record store in Gerrard Street in London. Page suggested that they attempt Train Kept A-Rollin', originally a jump blues song popularized in a rockabilly version by Johnny Burnett, which had been covered by the Yardbirds. As soon as I heard John Bonham play, Jones recalled, I knew this was going to be great. We locked together as a team immediately. Before leaving for Scandinavia, the group took part in a recording session for the PJ Proby album 3 Week Hero. The album's track, Jim's Blues, with Plant on harmonica, was the first studio track to feature all 4 future members of Led Zeppelin. The band completed the Scandinavian tour billed as the New Yardbirds, playing together for the first time in front of a live audience in Gladsaxe Teens Club in Gladsaxe, Denmark on September 7, 1968. Later that month, they began recording their first album, which was based on their live set. The album was recorded and mixed in 9 days, with Page covering all the costs. After the album's completion, the band were forced to change their name after Draja issued a cease and desist letter stating that Page was allowed to use the New Yardbirds moniker for the Scandinavian dates only. One account of how the new band's name was chosen held that Moon and Entwistle had suggested that a supergroup with Page and Beck would go down like a lead balloon, an idiom for disastrous results. The groups dropped the A in lead at the suggestion of their manager, Peter Grant, so that those unfamiliar with the term would not pronounce it lead. The word balloon was replaced with Zeppelin, a word which, according to music journalist Keith Chadwick, brought the perfect combination of heavy and light combustibility and grace. Grant secured a $143,000 advance contract, which would be over $1.1 million today, from Atlantic Records in November 1968. At the time, the biggest deal for its kind for a new band. Atlantic was a label with a catalog of mainly blues, soul, and jazz artists, but in the late 1960s, they began to take an interest in British progressive rock acts. At the recommendation of British singer Dusty Springfield, a friend of Jones, who at the time was completing her first Atlantic album, Dusty in Memphis, record execs signed Led Zeppelin without having ever seen them. Under the terms of their contract, the band had autonomy in deciding when they would release albums and tour, and had the final say over the contents and design of each album. They would also decide how to promote each release and which tracks to release as singles. They founded their own company, Superhype, to handle all publishing rights. The band began their first UK tour on October 4th, 1968, still billed as the New Yardbirds. They played their first show as Led Zeppelin at the University of Surrey in Battersea on October 25th. Tour manager Richard Cole, who would become a major figure in the touring life of the group, organized their first North American tour at the end of the year. Their self-titled debut album was released in the US during the tour on January 12, 1969, and peaked at number 10 on the Billboard chart. It was released in the UK, where it peaked at number 6. The album's memorable guitar riffs, lumbering rhythms, psychedelic blues, groovy and bluesy shuffles with hints of English folk music made it a significant turning point in the evolution of hard rock and heavy metal. In their first year, Led Zeppelin had completed 4 US and 4 UK concert tours, and also released their second album, Led Zeppelin II. Recording mostly on the road at various North American studios, it was a greater commercial success than their first album and reached the number 1 chart position in the US and the UK. Their album further developed the mostly blues rock musical style established on their debut release, creating a sound that was heavy, hard, brutal, and direct, and which would be highly influential and frequently imitated. A lot of people suggest that Led Zeppelin II was the musical starting point for heavy metal. The band saw their albums as individual, complete listening experiences, disliking the re-editing of existing tracks for release as singles. Grant maintained an aggressive pro-album stance, particularly in the UK, where there were few radio and TV outlets for rock music. Without the band's consent, however, some songs were released as singles, particularly in the US. In 1969, an edited version of Whole Lotta Love, a track from their second album, was released as a single in the US. It had reached number 4 in the Billboard chart in 1970, selling over 1 million copies and helping to cement the band's popularity. The group also increasingly shunned television appearances, citing that their preference was that their fans hear and see them in live concert. Following the release of their second album, Led Zeppelin completed several more US tours. They played initially in clubs and ballrooms and then in larger auditoriums as their popularity grew. Some early Led Zeppelin concerts lasted more than 4 hours, with expanded and improvised live versions of their repertoire. Many of these shows have been preserved as bootleg recordings. It was during this period of intensive concert touring that the band developed a reputation for offstage excess. In 1970, Page and Plant retired to a remote cottage in Wales to commence work on their third album, Led Zeppelin III. The result was a more acoustic style that was strongly influenced by folk and Celtic music and showcased the band's versatility. The album's rich acoustic sound initially received mixed reactions, with critics and fans surprised at the turn from the primarily electric arrangements of their first 2 albums, further fueling the band's hostility to the musical press. It had reached number 1 in the UK music and US charts, but its stay would be the shortest of their first 5 albums. The opening song, Immigrant Song, was released as a US single in November 1970 against the band's wishes, but it reached the top 20 on the Billboard chart. During the 1970s, Led Zeppelin reached new heights of commercial and critical success that made them one of the most influential groups of the era, eclipsing their earlier achievement. The band's image also changed as the members began to wear elaborate and flamboyant clothing, with Page taking the lead on the flamboyant appearance by wearing a glittering moon and stars outfit. Led Zeppelin changed their show by using things such as lasers, professional light shows, and mirror balls. They traveled in a private jet airliner, which they nicknamed the Starship. They rented out entire sections of hotels and became the subject of frequently repeated stories of debauchery. One involved John Bonham riding a motorcycle through a rented floor of the Riot House, while another involved the destruction of a room in the Tokyo Hilton, leading to the group being banned from that establishment for life. Although they developed a reputation for trashing their hotel sites and throwing television sets out of the windows, some suggest that these tales have been exaggerated. Led Zeppelin released their 4th album on November 8, 1971. It is variously referred to as Led Zeppelin IV or Untitled. The band wanted to release the 4th album with no title or information in response to the music press, quote-unquote, going on about Zeppelin being a hype. But the record company wanted something on the cover, so in discussions, it was agreed to have 4 symbols to represent the 4 members of the band, and that it was the 4th album. With 37 million copies sold, Led Zeppelin IV is one of the best-selling albums in history, and its massive popularity cemented Led Zeppelin's status as superstars of the 1970s. By 2021, it had sold 24 million copies in the US alone. The song Stairway to Heaven, although never released as a single, was the most requested and most played song on American rock radio in the 1970s. The group followed up this album's release with tours of the UK, Australia, North America, Japan, and the UK again from late 1971 through early 1973. Their next album, Houses of the Holy, was released in March 1973. It featured further experimentation from the band, which expanded their use of synthesizers and mellotron orchestration. The predominantly orange album cover, designed by the London-based design group Hypnosis, depicted images of nude children climbing the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. Although the children are not shown from the front, the cover was controversial at the time of the album's release. Houses of the Holy topped charts worldwide, and the band's subsequent tour of North America in 1973 broke records for attendance as they consistently filled large auditoriums and stadiums. At Tampa Stadium in Florida, they played to 56,800 fans, breaking the record set by the Beatles' 1965 Shea Stadium concert and grossing $309,000. 3 sold-out shows at the Madison Square Garden in New York were filmed for a motion picture, but the theatrical release for this project, which was called The Song Remains the Same, was delayed until 1976. Before the final night's performance, $180,000, which would be over $1 million today, of the band's money from gate receipts was stolen from a safe deposit box at the Drake Hotel. Also in 1973, the band purchased Hammerwood Park, a Georgian mansion in East Sussex, at auction, which they planned to turn into a recording studio and accommodation. However, the house was in an increasing state of dereliction, and the plans were eventually shelved. Although it would be used in the filming of the music video for The Song Remains the Same, the house was subsequently boarded up and put for sale in 1976. In 1974, Led Zeppelin took a break from touring and launched their own record label, Swan Song, named after an unreleased song. The record label's logo was based on a drawing called Evening Fall of Day by William Renner. The drawing features the figure of a winged human-like being interpreted as either Apollo or Icarus. In addition to using Swan Song as a vehicle to promote their own albums, the band expanded the label's roster, signing artists such as Bad Company, The Pretty Things, and Maggie Bell. The label was successful while Led Zeppelin existed, but folded less than 3 years after they disbanded. In 1975, Led Zeppelin's double album Physical Graffiti was their first release on the Swan Song label. It consisted of 15 songs, of which 8 had been recorded at Headley Grange in 1974 and 7 had been recorded earlier. A review in Rolling Stone magazine referred to Physical Graffiti as Led Zeppelin's quote-unquote bid for artistic respectability, adding that the only bands they had to compete with for the title The World's Best Rock Band were the Rolling Stones and The Who. The album was a massive commercial and critical success. Shortly after the release of Physical Graffiti, all previous Led Zeppelin albums simultaneously entered the top 200 album chart again, and the band embarked on yet another North American tour, now employing sophisticated sound and lighting systems. In May 1975, they played 5 sold-out nights at the Earl's Court Arena in London, at the time the largest arena in Britain. Following their triumphant Earl's Court appearance, Led Zeppelin took a holiday and planned a fall tour in America, scheduling to open with 2 outdoor dates in San Francisco. However, in August 1975, Robert Plant and his wife Maureen were involved in a serious car crash on a holiday in Rhodes, Greece. Plant suffered a broken ankle and Maureen was badly injured, requiring a blood transfusion to save her life. Unable to tour, he headed to the Channel Island of Jersey to spend August and September recuperating with Bonham and Page in tow. The band then reconvened in Malibu, California. During this forced hiatus, much of the material for their next album, Presence, was written. By this time, Led Zeppelin were the world's #1 rock attraction, having outsold most bands at the time, including the Rolling Stones. Present, released in March 1976, marked a change in the Led Zeppelin sound towards more straightforward guitar-based jams, departing from the acoustic ballads from their last few albums. Although it sold platinum, Presence received a mixed reaction among fans and the music press, with some people suggesting that the band's excesses had caught up to them. Page had also begun using heroin during recording sessions for the album, a habit which might have affected the band's later live shows and studio recordings, although he denies this. Because of Plant's injuries, Led Zeppelin did not tour in 1976. Instead, the band completed the concert film The Song Remains the Same and the accompanying soundtrack album. The film premiered in New York on October 20th, 1976, but was given a lukewarm reception by critics and fans. The film was particularly unsuccessful in the UK, where, unwilling to tour since 1975 because of their tax exile status, Led Zeppelin faced an uphill battle to recapture the public affections. In 1977, Led Zeppelin embarked on yet another major concert tour in North America. The band set yet another attendance record with an audience of 76,229 at their Silver Dome concert on April 30th. It was, according to the Guinness Book of World Records, the largest attendance to that date for a single act show. Although the tour was financially profitable, it was beset by offstage problems. On April 19th, over 70 people were arrested as about 1,000 fans tried to gatecrash Cincinnati Riverfront Coliseum for 2 sold-out concerts, while others tried to gain entry by throwing rocks and bottles through glass doors. On June 3rd, a concert at Tampa Stadium was cut short because of a severe thunderstorm, despite tickets indicating rain or shine. A riot broke out, resulting in arrests and injuries. After the July 23rd show at the Day of the Green Festival at the Oakland Coliseum, Bonham and other members of Led Zeppelin's support staff were arrested after a member of promoter Bill Graham's staff was badly beaten during the band's performance. The following day's second Oakland concert was the group's final live appearance in the United States. 2 days later, as they checked into a French Quarter hotel for their July 30th performance at the Louisiana Superdome, Plant received news that his 5-year-old son Carrick had died of a stomach virus. The rest of the tour was immediately canceled, prompting widespread speculation about Led Zeppelin's future. In November 1978, the group recorded at Polar Studios in Stockholm, Sweden. The resulting album, In Through the Outdoor, featured sonic experimentation that again drew mixed reaction from critics. Nevertheless, this album did reach #1 in the UK and the US charts in just the second week of it being released. With this album's release, their entire catalog returned to the Billboard Top 200 in the weeks of October 27th and November 3rd of 1979. In August 1979, after 2 warm-up shows in Copenhagen, Led Zeppelin headlined 2 concerts at the Knebworth Music Festival, playing to a crowd of approximately 104,000 on the first night. A brief, low-key European tour was undertaken in June and July of 1980, featuring a stripped-down set without the usual lengthy jams and solos. On June 27th, at a show in Nuremberg, Germany, the concert came to an abrupt halt in the middle of the 3rd song when Bonham collapsed on stage and was rushed to the hospital. Speculation in the press suggested that his collapse had been due to the result of excessive alcohol and drug use, while the band claimed that he had simply eaten too many bananas. A North American tour, the band's first since 1977, was scheduled to commence on October 17th, 1980. However, on September 24th, Bonham was picked up by Led Zeppelin assistant Rex King to attend rehearsals at Bray Studios. During the journey, Bonham asked to stop for breakfast, where he downed 4 quadruple vodkas with a ham roll. After taking a bite of the ham roll, he said to his assistant, "Breakfast." He continued to drink heavily after arriving at the studio. The rehearsals were halted late that evening, and the band retired to Page's house. After midnight, Bonham, who had fallen asleep, was taken to bed and placed on his side. At 1:45 p.m. the next day, Benji LaFerbe, who was their new tour manager, and John Paul Jones found Bonham dead. The cause of death was asphyxiation from vomit. The finding was accidental death. An autopsy found no other recreational drugs in Bonham's body. Although he had recently begun to take a combination of antipsychotics and antidepressants to combat his anxiety, it is unclear if these substances interacted with the alcohol in his system. The planned North American tour was canceled, and despite rumors that Cozy Powell, Carmen Appice, Barrymore Barlow, Simon Kirke, Rick Lee, and Bev Bevan would join the group as its replacement, the remaining members decided to disband. A December 4th, 1980 press statement stated that, "We wish it to be known that the loss of our dear friend and the deep sense of undivided harmony felt by ourselves and our manager have led us to decide that we could not continue as we were." The statement was simply signed, Led Zeppelin. Following their dissolution, the first significant music project by one of its members was the Honey Drippers, which Plant initially formed in 1981. The group, featuring Page on lead guitar, along with studio musicians and friends of the pair, including Jeff Beck, Paul Schaefer, and Nile Rodgers, released its only album in 1984. Plant focused on a different direction from Zeppelin, playing standards in a more R&B style, highlighted by a cover of Sea of Love, which peaked at #3 on the Billboard charts in early 1985. On July 13, 1985, Page, Plant, and Jones reunited for their Live Aid concert at JFK Stadium in Philadelphia, playing a short set featuring drummers Tommy Thompson and Phil Collins, and bassist Paul Martinez. Collins had contributed to Plant's first 2 solo albums, while Martinez was a member of Plant's solo band. The performance was tainted by a lack of rehearsal with the two drummers, Page's struggles with an out-of-tune guitar, poorly functioning monitors, and Plant's hoarse voice. Page described the performance as pretty shambolic, while Plant just characterized it as an atrocity. Three members reunited again in May 4th, 1988 for the Atlantic Records 40th anniversary concert with Bonham's son Jason on drums. The result was again disjointed. Plant and Page had argued immediately prior to taking the stage about whether to play Stairway to Heaven. Jones's keyboards were absent from the live television feed. Page described the performance as one big disappointment. Plant said the gig was foul. In 1994, Page and Plant reunited for a 90-minute unleaded MTV project. They later released an album called No Quarter, Jimmy Page and Robert Plant Unleaded, which featured some reworked Led Zeppelin songs, and embarked on a world tour the following year. This is said to be the beginning of a rift between the band members, as Jones was not even told of the reunion. In 1995, Led Zeppelin were inducted into the United States Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by Steven Tyler and Joe Perry of Aerosmith. Jason and Zoe Bonham also attended, representing their late father. At the induction ceremony, the band's inner rift became apparent when Jones joked upon accepting his award, "Thank you, my friends, for finally remembering my phone number." Page and Plant released another album called Walking in Clarksdale in 1998, featuring all new material, but after disappointing sales, the partnership dissolved before a planned Australian tour. 2003 saw the release of the triple live album How the West Was Won and Led Zeppelin DVD, a 6-hour chronological set of live footage which became the best-selling music DVD in history. On December 10th, 2007, they reunited for the Ahmet Ertegun tribute concert at the O2 Arena in London, with Jason Bonham again taking his father's place on drums. According to the 2009 Guinness Book of World Records, this show set a record for the highest demand for tickets for one music concert, as 20 million requests were submitted online. Critics praised the performance, and there was widespread speculation about a full reunion. Page, Jones, and Jason Bonham were reported to be willing to tour and to be working on new material for a new Zeppelin project. Plant continued his touring commitments with Alison Krauss, stating in September 2008 that he would not record or tour with the band. "I told them I was busy and they'd simply have to wait," he recalled in 2014. "I would come around eventually, which they were fine with, at least to my knowledge, but it turns out they weren't. And what's even more disheartening, Jimmy used it against me." Jones and Page reportedly looked for a replacement for Plant. Candidates included Steven Tyler of Aerosmith and Miles Kennedy of Alter Bridge. However, in January 2009, it was confirmed that the project had been abandoned. A film of the O2 performance called Celebration Day premiered on October 17, 2012 and was released on DVD on November 19th. The film grossed $2 million in one night, and the live album peaked at number 4 and number 9 in the UK and the US respectively. To commemorate the band's 50th anniversary, Page, Plant, and Jones announced an unofficial illustrated book celebrating 50 years since the formation of the band. Also released for the celebration was a reissue of How the West Was Won on March 23rd, 2018, which includes the album's first pressing on vinyl. For Record Store Day on April 21st, 2018, Led Zeppelin released a 7-minute single called Rock and Roll / Friends, which was their first single in 21 years. In October 2020, Page released a photo collection called Jimmy Page The Anthology, confirming a band documentary for the band's 50th anniversary, but due to the pandemic, its progress had slowed down. And that is Led Zeppelin, ladies and gentlemen, the best band in rock history. I could say that. Pretty sure a lot of people would agree with me. The first time I heard Stairway to Heaven, that was the first rock song I got into. And I was just like, wow, I was blown away because you could never get me to listen to an 11-minute song before then. But I finally did it. And I was just like, whoa, that song blew me away. But again, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. Drop some more bands because I'm thinking about doing the Rolling Stones, the Doors, the Who, the Beatles, of course, AC/DC, Kiss, all these famous rock bands. I want to venture into different genres as well, not just rock music, also like rap and reggae, R&B, all the other, But thank you so much, and I really appreciate all the support for this channel. But I'm out. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Peace.